Hi there, welcome back to ADSR Tuts, another sound design tutorial using Polyplex today. In a previous sound design tutorial we looked at putting these kind of drum sounds together and adding some effects in the effects section, and also using some automation to kind of create those drum fills that we had there. So in this tutorial I'm going to focus on adding some tonal elements to this loop and also look at the modulation options that we have at the bottom here. So I'm going to start off pad 6. I've actually reset this pad, and in the effects I've turned all the effects off for now so we can add them back in later, and we just want to find the right sample to begin with. So I'm going to solo this top sample or sampler here, and I can do this by right clicking and this kind of mute and unmute button here. If you right click it, it actually solos this individual one shot. So let's find a sample to use in here. Something a bit tonal, maybe kind of a stab. That's quite nice. Old school stab like that's pretty cool. So let's put some of those notes into this loop that we have here. So and let's maybe take the volume of this sound up a little bit, so it's kind of coming through the mix of those other sounds a bit more. And what I want to look at here is this modulation section at the bottom, and maybe just using the envelope modulation here to just bring this sound out a little bit. So what we can do here is we can set up this modulation. We've gone to this envelope and I've gone over to the EQ section, and now I can apply modulations to whichever one of these kind of settings here: the delay, attack, decay, release, the pitch, the start of the sample, the pan. And you can apply modulations by just selecting whether you want to apply LFO modulation, envelope or velocity modulation, by just clicking on these and then drawing in a positive, or dialing in, clicking up or down, dialing in a positive or negative amount of modulation. So I'm going to look at this high gain on the EQ, and I'm going to use an envelope to modulate that high gain to just bring the kind of top end of the sound out a little bit. So I'm going to use this envelope. I've turned the envelope modulation on the high gain, and now I'm going to maybe put an amount of about 30, 35 or 40 in here. And you can see this move now. Now I've applied this positive modulation, this high gain. When we get that sound, you can hear that high gain moves, and what it's doing there is it's applying this envelope to this high frequency gain, and we're getting this high frequency burst, and it's kind of like a sort of high frequency energy kind of burst on that sound. Now take the envelope modulation off, kind of bringing the top end out, and what I'm going to do is edit this envelope so it's a little bit kind of tighter, a bit more plucky. I'm also going to check that trigger there, so the envelope's going to re-trigger with each new key, which is pretty cool. I'm going to keep a relatively sharp attack, maybe back it off slightly, tighten up the decay, sustain bring right down, release bring quite far down as well. Get this plucky sort of sound, and then we can use that decay to bring the sound out. So if I have this decay right down here, it's quite sort of stabby. If I bring this decay out, you get that decay on the sound. So it's almost like be quite a cool thing to automate in a track. Okay, so let's actually look in this effects section now and put some effects on this sound. So I'm just going to use the delay because I think a sound like that were nice with this delay on there. So I'm going to send a bit of this sound into the delay, maybe about 50, 53. So you're getting that kind of slap back delay on the sound now. which is pretty cool. And I don't think I really want any compression or reverb, maybe a bit of reverb. Actually, because the reverb is being sent through the stretch effect, it's probably a little bit too much that. But there we go, a bit of delay. And because we've got this automation going on the delay, we're getting this quite cool sort of delay. Nice, really nice delay on that sound. So let's look at this next pad here. Let's put something else kind of tonal in here. So again, I've reset this sound and I've taken all the effects off. So we're just going to solo up this first sampler here. And the really cool thing is you've got some really cool one-shots in Polyplex, and you've got actually two one-shot sections. So we've got one-shot 1, and then when you have one-shot 1 selected, subtypes, tonal, organic, mechanic or vocal. If you actually go into one-shot 2, you get some different options. So you get tonal synth, ambience, SFX and impact. If I look at the tonal synth section here and select a kind of tonal synth to use for this sound, and I want something with quite a bit of kind of decay and a bit of length on the sample, because we're going to use some LFO modulation on this sample. So I even think what we had before will sound pretty cool with some LFO modulation. So we've got that sample set up, and I'm going to look at modulating the high gain again as well as the high shelf. And down here we've got the envelope selected at the moment. Let's move over to this LFO. Let's apply LFO modulation to the high shelf and the high gain on this sound, and let's go positive of 100, so full amount of modulation there. And you can see it's kind of telling us what the LFO is doing to these high shelf and high gain here. And so what we want to do now is kind of set this LFO up a little bit. So at the moment it's not tempo synced to the track, so let's tempo sync it, and you can see the movement here that's kind of changing now. Getting that slight change in the movement. Let's change this frequency up, so let's speed it up a little bit, maybe 1/12 for a bit of a kind of shuffly sort of vibe. Kind of by applying it to the high gain and high shelf, we're moving, it's like sweeping the frequency and boosting and kind of dipping the gain of the frequency that's being applied, so getting that quite cool effect. And with the LFO it's re-triggering as well with new key presses, which is quite cool. So let's go and program in some MIDI notes on this pattern here. Move that forward a little bit. Bring the volume of this sound up a little bit so it's come through the mix a bit more. Maybe plus 11, 12. And we could then automate this frequency control here. So we'll play around with the envelope shape, the wave. Let's move to this global effects section and put some effects on the sound. So I'm just going to send this pad to maybe compress it. So it's kind of bringing it out a little bit, and also send it to this stretch effect would probably sound pretty cool. So we get quite a nice sort of vibe on that sound. We could even go a bit crazy with it and apply some LFO to the pitch. Okay, so a little bit more sound design stuff using Polyplex, and also delving into the modulation section at the bottom there, really powerful. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial, I hope you found it useful. Any questions, please get in touch, and thanks for watching. Cheers.